changed in downtown Kannapolis since we began filming our series on the textile industry. We began where we're ending today, and that is at the site of historic Town Lake in downtown Kannapolis, now the site of a dramatic new building arising out of the lake. I'm Clarence Horton. On behalf of historic Cabarrus and Cabarrus County, welcome to Kannapolis Renaissance, the third and final segment in our series on the decline of the textile industry in Cabarrus County and its effect not only on the economy of the county, but on an entire town, the model mill town that James W. Cannon built in 1906. In 1967, the townspeople of Kannapolis honored the boss, Charles A. Cannon, for a lifetime of accomplishments on behalf of his community and county and the state. Only 4 years later, Mr. Cannon was dead. His final illness came on him while he worked at his desk in the Cannon office building, working on a report to shareholders, perhaps as he would have liked it to be. When the news of the man whom many employees affectionately called Uncle Charlie circulated among the community, there was a sense of shock and a sense of loss, as there always is at the end of any era. People depended on the mill for their livelihood, many working here all of their lives. Each year at the annual awards banquets, employees of Cannon Mills Company were recognized for long years of service. An average of about 12 employees each year were honored for being 55-year employees of Cannon Mills Company. When longtime employee Oscar Towell was presented with his 55-year service pin, he had the privilege of presenting the 55-year service pin to the man he affectionately called the boss, Charles A. Cannon. Many of the employees present also received 35 and 45-year service awards. For many of them, they had never worked anywhere else or for anyone else. For them, it was a time of concern and grieving. It was as if a family member had died. Many people lived in company-owned housing, and they were concerned about the possible loss of their jobs, the loss of their housing and health care, the effect of the change in mill management on them and on their children. With characteristic foresight, Charles Cannon began to plan for the changing of the guard long before his death. With his blessing, Don S. Holt was named President and Chief Executive Officer of Cannon Mills Company in 1962. Mr. Holt was the first non-Cannon family member to hold both those offices since the mills were consolidated in 1928. Mr. Holt was a native of Graham, North Carolina, a star football player at UNC Chapel Hill, and had spent his entire adult life working in the textile industry. Mr. Holt began working with the Cannon Group in 1950. He worked in Plant 6 in Concord until 1959, when he was named an executive vice president and moved his office to Kannapolis. Following Mr. Cannon's death, the Cannon Board of Directors followed his direction and named Don S. Holt as chairman of the board of Cannon Mills Company. Mr. Holt promptly began a $25 million capital improvement program. He also hired Edward L. Rankin Jr. to supervise a far-reaching public relations campaign. The company began the publication of a company newsletter, which not only contained business news of Cannon Mills Company, but also contained news about the lives and accomplishments of its many employees. For most employees in Cannon Mills Company, their jobs didn't drastically change, and life began to settle into a new phase of history in Kannapolis. There were losses along the way, of course. Generations who had attended McKeever School on South Main Street rode or walked by the charred remains of the oldest school in Kannapolis after it burned in March 1972. The following year, Sank S. McCoy died. Mr. McCoy was a member of one of Kannapolis' pioneer families, and he served as overseer in number 7 weave room for 46 years. In January 1982, the old J.W. Cannon Junior High School, which was unoccupied at the time, was also burned as a deliberate act. J.W. Cannon had served as Kannapolis' high school for many years prior to that time. There were also gains. After 3 years of work by Cannon employees, the Cannon Visitor Center opened in the renovated Swanee Theater building in October 1974. The center featured the replicated office of J.W. Cannon, the mill's founder, as well as displays which both depicted and explained the manufacture and sale of textiles through the entire process. With the popular Charles Cannon no longer at the helm, the Textile Workers Union of America resumed its efforts to bring a union to Cannon Mills Company.
For those of you I have not met, I am Don Holt, Chairman of the Board of your company, Cannon Mills. I have been in textiles all my life. I was born in a mill house right out the mill gate. My first job was cleaning quills, and I have worked in textiles ever since, about 50 years. For the next few minutes, I'd like to talk with you about the decision you will be called on to make this week as to whether here at Cannon you want to speak for yourself or surrender that right to someone else.
In November 1974, following a spirited campaign and the largest vote in the history of the textile industry, Cannon Mills employees rejected the Textile Workers Union. 1974 was also a watershed year for Cannon management. Don Holt retired from leadership of the company. Harold Hornaday had served as president and chief operating officer of Cannon Mills Company since 1973. Following the retirement of Mr. Holt, Harold Hornaday became both the chairman of the board and chief executive officer of Cannon Mills Company. For a time, things went well for the Cannon organization. Cannon Mills Company's sales in 1976 exceeded $450 million. By 1977, when the company was prepared to celebrate its 90th birthday, it had expended over $100 million for plants and other capital improvements over the preceding 5 years, including the erection of a massive new sheet distribution center. Other manufacturers were attracted to easily accessible Cabarrus County with its high-quality workforce and its very attractive quality of life. In 1978, as Cannon Mills Company was completing its acquisition of Wiscasset Mills, Giant Philip Morris Inc. announced that it was going to build a new manufacturing facility for the manufacture of its tobacco products here in Cabarrus County. Meanwhile, management was changing again at Cannon Mills Company. Upon the resignation of Harold Hornaday, Otto Stoltz began serving as the chairman of the board, president, and CEO of Cannon Mills Company. Under the leadership of new President Stoltz, the company acquired Beacon Manufacturing Company in 1980, a leading manufacturer of blankets and other bedding. Meanwhile, the attractive Cannon Visitor Center was welcoming its 100,000th guest. Meanwhile, local residents sought more autonomy over their local schools and the property owned by those schools. In 1977, under new legislation passed by the North Carolina General Assembly, a Kannapolis Board of Education was established, with its members to be elected by the citizens rather than to be appointed by the members of the Cabarrus and Rowan County Board of Commissioners. That new Board of Education was to hold title to the schools and to their property located within the city system. From time to time over the years, the question of incorporation of the town had been the subject of discussion by its citizens. In 1980, as Kannapolis was preparing to celebrate its 75th birthday, the Kannapolis Chamber of Commerce established a special task force to survey local citizens and to make recommendations as to whether a full-scale study of incorporation should follow. In 1981, the town put on its best face for its 75th birthday celebration. Beloved Little Mount Vernon, the monument to the Kannapolis men and women who had served their country during World War II, had been removed. In its place, the local American Legion post, Beaver Pittman Post 115, had erected a sundial memorial in 1976. That memorial, surrounded as it is by well-tended flower beds, soon became the beauty spot for the town. In 1980, local resident Janet Ward Black, the daughter of a pioneer Kannapolis family, was chosen Miss North Carolina. Janet Ward agreed to participate in the birthday celebration together with Congressman Bill Hefner and Governor Jim Hunt. In many ways, that 1981 birthday celebration in Kannapolis marked the end of Kannapolis as a company town. The following year, Pacific Holding Company, which was owned by businessman investor David Murdock, purchased Cannon Mills Company in a leveraged buyout. David Murdock is a native of Kansas City, Missouri. He's largely a self-taught man who served as a gunnery instructor during World War II, worked as a manual laborer, and taught himself the home construction business. He became financially successful through a combination of sound investment decisions, hard work, and sheer determination. Upon the purchase of Cannon Mills Company, President Otto G. Stoltz resigned, and David Murdock became chairman of the board and CEO of Cannon Mills Company. He immediately announced a huge $200 million capital improvement program for the company, which would involve automation of many of the plant's operations. Mr. Murdock also determined that it was time for the community to decide how best to furnish governmental functions to its citizens. In response to that vision, he appointed a Cannon task force for community development and charged that the task force work closely with the 28 Citizen Advisory Committee of leading Kannapolis citizens, also appointed by Murdock. Their purpose was to determine how best to improve the quality of life for the citizens of Kannapolis. The debate over the incorporation of Kannapolis continued to rage. In 1983, the North Carolina General Assembly appointed a Kannapolis Charter Commission to thoroughly study the question of incorporation and to make recommendations to the citizens either supporting or opposing incorporation of the town. Also in 1983, the citizens of Kannapolis, with the substantial help of David Murdock, built and dedicated a new senior citizens center to serve the older population of Kannapolis. Leadership at Cannon Mills Company changed also. Although David Murdock continued to be chairman of the board of Cannon Mills Company, Harold M. Messmer Jr. became president and chief operating officer of Cannon Mills. David Murdock wanted to continue and complete the colonial-style facelift which had begun in Kannapolis almost 40 years earlier. In 1984, substantial renovations to West Avenue in Kannapolis were begun, and the attractive Oak Avenue Mall was constructed and opened. Some of the changes were more painful, however. The landmark neon sign, which had symbolized Kannapolis to generations of its residents, was demolished and removed. On July 31st, 1984, the Kannapolis Charter Commission presented its report discussing the issues and recommending that the town incorporate. Local civic and business leaders immediately began a program to inform and to educate the residents strongly urging them to vote for incorporation. Despite some opposition, the citizens of the city voted for incorporation in November 1984. On December 11th, 1984, it was official. After all those years, Kannapolis had finally officially become a city. A large crowd gathered to commemorate the occasion in downtown Kannapolis. The throng included hundreds of Kannapolis school children. They were addressed by attorney Bachman Brown, who told the group that the standards and values and memories of the first 78 years of the town would serve as a fit cornerstone on which to build the future of a greater city of Kannapolis. At noon, in honor of the occasion, the church bells of Kannapolis all rang out and fire sirens sounded to mark the long-awaited day. Kannapolis business and civic leaders were delighted when the new city was chosen as a stop along the route of the Carolinian, an Amtrak train which ran from Charlotte to Raleigh for those who wanted to travel to the state capital. Many Kannapolis residents turned out for the inaugural stop of the train on October 26, 1984 at the old Kannapolis Depot. Two substantial tracts of land were donated by David Murdoch for use as public parks. One large area near West C Street and near the old Kannapolis Cemetery became home to the new Kannapolis Senior Center. In 1985, ground was broken at the edge of the park for a new Kannapolis Library by trustees of the Charles A. Cannon Charitable Trust and by David Murdoch. Baker's Creek Park, which is located in the Rowan County section of Kannapolis, provides numerous recreational activities and opportunities for all the citizens of Kannapolis. Later in 1985, on May 7th, Attorney Bachman S. Brown Jr. was installed as the first elected mayor of the city of Kannapolis. That historic first city council consisted of Mayor Brown, Harold Holbrooks, Sam Stroop, Durwood Balst, Ken Gathers, Helen Beaver, and Helen Leidecker. Meanwhile, the mill continued with its efforts to renovate and modernize its plants. It did so under new management. Although Harold Messmer continued to serve as president of Pacific Holding Company, H. Douglas Kingsmore Jr. was elected as president and chief operating officer of Cannon Mills Company. The new management team soon faced its first test. There were renewed union efforts to unionize Cannon Mills Company, which led to a major election. Unionization was, of course, strongly opposed by the company. Local workers were loyal to the new owner, David Murdoch, and defeated union efforts by almost 4,000 votes. In 1986, David Murdoch's Pacific Holding Company announced that it was selling the bed and bath operations of Cannon Mills Company to textile giant Fieldcrest Mills Incorporated of Eden, North Carolina. The two textile giants would be run as one combined operation under the name Fieldcrest Cannon Incorporated. When construction of a new YMCA began in Village Park in 1985, the magnificent old 1940s YMCA structure in downtown Kannapolis was demolished and removed. It was the end of an era for many Kannapolis residents who were left with memories of civic club meetings, banquets, learning to write term papers at the Y Library, learning to swim in the Y Pool, bowling, playing games, and even getting a haircut. However, when the new YMCA building was dedicated on January 18, 1987, it began a new era for a whole new generation of Kannapolis young people who quickly began to establish their own traditions and to build their own memories. During the period of growth which followed the incorporation of Kannapolis, Many well-known Kannapolis businesses moved to new locations or built new buildings. White's Office Supplies opened in a new location along Center Grove Road, as did Whitley's Funeral Home, which moved from its longtime location on South Main Street in Kannapolis to a new location on Center Grove Road, now known as Dale Earnhardt Boulevard, of course. Concord Telephone Company built a new office along South Main Street. The Kannapolis Chamber of Commerce, which had been organized in 1977, moved into new quarters along South Main Street in 1985. Local area churches worked together with the Cabarrus Cooperative Christian Ministries to open a new ministry along South Main Street. Kannapolis Christian Ministry opened in 1985, just in time for Christmas of that year. In the midst of all the change and the construction, Kannapolis residents and Cannon Mill employees alike paused to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the giant Cannon chain in 1987 at that historic first plant, which was erected along Franklin Avenue in Concord. The week-long event featured a special display related to textile items at the Kannapolis Visitor Center, which had been prepared by the Kannapolis History Associates, and which included many textile-related items and a reconstruction of the office of Charles A. Cannon, including the desk that Mr. Cannon used. The week-long celebration also included a golf tournament, musical celebration, and a local football game. It ended on Saturday, August 29th, with visits from Governor Jim Martin and Miss North Carolina, Lori Boggs, who was herself a native of Kannapolis. As school children returned to their classes that year, they were given a special commemorative button honoring the 100th anniversary of Cannon Mills, which had been prepared for them by the children of the Ralph and Sonia Johnston family. On September 22nd, 1989, a memorable hurricane named Hugo found its way into the interior of North Carolina, devastating much of the Piedmonts of North and South Carolina, including the Kannapolis area. Power was out for a long period of time. Ancient trees were uprooted. Houses and cars were damaged. In a time-honored Kannapolis tradition, however, neighbors helped each other clean up the debris left from the storm, and many shared power from emergency generators. From its beginnings in 1906, Kannapolis residents have been justly proud of the great sports teams which have represented the city. All the way from the hose and reel championship teams of the 1920s and 30s, the outstanding volleyball, softball, basketball teams fielded by the local YMCA, to the championship American Legion baseball teams in the 1950s and 1960s, and include the perennial powerhouse football teams fielded by J.W. Cannon and then A.L. Brown high schools. Thus, the entire city celebrated on December 10, 1989, when the A.L. Brown Wonders defeated defending state champion Burlington Cummings 24-0 in the state 3A playoff at historic Keenan Stadium in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. In 1990, the appearance of South Main Street in Kannapolis changed dramatically. The historic Montgomery Ward and professional buildings were destroyed in that year to make room for more expansion of Cannon Village in that direction. Persons who were watching the demolition of those buildings, which had been Kannapolis landmarks for over 50 years, reminisced about visits to the doctors and lawyers and dentists located in the professional building, and about shopping in Montgomery Ward to fill all their household needs. They especially remembered the ear-splitting siren located on the top of the Montgomery Ward building to warn of air raids or fires. That area is now the location of the Memorial Park, dedicated to the memory of the great NASCAR racer, Dale Earnhardt, himself a native of Kannapolis. On August 23, 1991, Fieldcrest Cannon announced that it was moving its corporate headquarters to Kannapolis. Even while the company was in the midst of its corporate restructuring, however, it was facing a determined fight from the Textile Workers Union. On August 21, 1991, Fieldcrest announced that it had won a contested union election by about 200 votes. The union was contesting more than 500 votes, however, and it appeared inevitable that an appeal would follow. In 1992, Cabarrus County celebrated its 200th birthday with a year-long celebration in which Kannapolis played an important part. An historical marker honoring the life and accomplishments of textile giant J.W. Cannon was erected along South Cannon Boulevard. His son, Charles A. Cannon, was honored on the 100th anniversary of his birthday by the dedication of a new local history room at the Kannapolis branch of the Cannon Memorial Library. On September 12, Kannapolis celebrated Founders Day as a part of the bicentennial celebration. Later that year, however, perhaps the highlight of the year was the dedication of the GI House to the memory of the veterans of all wars. The house was one of the remaining 100 prefabricated houses built in Kannapolis shortly after the end of World War II to provide housing for the returning veterans. It had been preserved over the years through the efforts of the Clarence Woman's Club, which was named for Clarence Tuttle Wicker. The Woman's Club had transferred the home to Kannapolis History Associates, who renovated it with the help of their many supporters. It's kept open for public tours through the efforts of local historian and veteran Norris Dearman. Another highlight of the 1992 bicentennial year for the residents of Kannapolis was the hour-long stop of the campaign train of President George Bush, who was engaged in a whistle-stop campaign against his challenger, Bill Clinton, for the presidential election that year. Kannapolis educators and residents were proud in 1992 that Eddie Tyson, a native of Kannapolis and a product of the Kannapolis City Schools, was himself elected as superintendent of the Kannapolis City School System. Kannapolis experienced a dramatic change in leadership in 1993 as challenger Richard Anderson defeated longtime and first mayor Bachman Brown for that position. Mayor Brown was praised by local civic and business leaders as well as the local newspapers for the leadership he had provided to the community, both as chair of the Kannapolis Charter Commission and as our first mayor. Kenneth Gathers, a Kannapolis councilman, was defeated by political newcomer in that year, Phil Meacham. However, Mr. Gathers was elected to the Kannapolis City Council by the remainder of the councilmen to fill the seat of Richard Anderson, who was vacating his council seat to become the second mayor of Kannapolis. At a referendum held in 1994, Kannapolis voters soundly defeated an $18.4 million bond package, which would have provided funds for recreational and utility and fire protection improvements in the city of Kannapolis. Many opponents complained that Kannapolis annexed too much territory during the 1980s, while others insisted that council should not have pledged $1.5 million toward the construction of Fieldcrest Cannon Stadium. After a series of sharply contested hearings, the National Labor Relations Board found that Fieldcrest Cannon was guilty of labor law violations during the contested 1991 union election. On September 5, 1995, the NLRB ordered that new elections be held in the 7 Cannon plants located in Cabarrus and Rowan counties based on its findings of violations during the earlier election. Local civic and business and political leaders continued to encourage businesses to move to the Kannapolis area. In 1995, Stanley Works built a new $30 million plant along Trinity Church Road. The following year, Royce Apparel broke ground on August 21st for a new 26,000 square foot plant off Lane Street. The new plant was located in an area which was renamed North Crest Industrial Park. Royce Apparel intended to build roads into the area and offer sites for sale to other businesses who were interested in relocating there. Water and sewer were also extended to that area. As the 20th century wound to a close, a trend toward regionalism, cooperative efforts, and mergers seemed to appear. In 1996, the Kannapolis daily newspaper, The Independent, agreed to merge with the Concord Tribune to form a new daily paper to be called the Independent Tribune. The last edition of the Kannapolis Daily Independent was printed on September 27th of that year. The following year, the Kannapolis Chamber of Commerce agreed to merge with the Concord Cabarrus Chamber of Commerce effective January 1, 1998. Kannapolis residents continued to strongly resist another merger which was frequently discussed. That is the merger of the Kannapolis City Schools with the Cabarrus County Schools. At the insistence of Cabarrus County commissioners, officials from the two school systems met together to explore the question of merger. After earnest discussions, however, it was agreed that the time was not right for a merger of the two systems and they remain independent systems. Concord Telephone Company, which served the Kannapolis area from its earliest days, celebrated its 100th birthday in 1997. The historic communications company is now part of CT Communications. In a replay of the contentious 1991 union election, Cannon workers again rejected the union in an election held on August 12 and 13, 1997. Officials of Unite, which was the successor to the Textile Workers Union of America, or TWUA, alleged numerous irregularities in the election procedures, vowed to contest the election and to seek a new election. The National Labor Relations Board ordered a hearing into the matter of the irregularities set for October 15, 1997.
David A. Hales of Centerville, Utah, was named to succeed retiring Kannapolis City Manager Gene McCombs and was scheduled to begin work on October 1st, 1997. That news was far overshadowed, however, by headlines in the Independent Tribune on September 11, 1997, which announced that Fieldcrest Cannon had been sold to Pilatex Corporation of Dallas, Texas, for a total sales price of $700 million, made up of both cash and stock. The Kannapolis residents and business leaders of the community attempted to remain optimistic, however, in the light of this third sale of the company. They also were grappling with news that the NLRB was ordering hearings into the matter of the contested recent union election and the fact that automation was costing jobs to Kannapolis workers. Although the high sale price and the acquisition of Fieldcrest Cannon placed Pilatex in the top 3 of American manufacturers, it eventually proved to be disastrous for the company in the long run. A new election cycle brought dramatic changes to Kannapolis city government in November 1997 as challenger Ray Moss, a Kannapolis native and retired minister, defeated incumbent Mayor Richard Anderson by only 12 votes to become the third elected mayor of the city of Kannapolis. During the tenure of new Mayor Moss, Kannapolis dramatically increased its area. In 1994, as part of an agreement made during litigation, Kannapolis agreed to defer the annexation of the Cottle Creek annexation area until 1999. The new area included 10 square miles of property added to the city, as well as 1,800 citizens. The new area was primarily residential, but local civic and business leaders expected that it would attract businesses, particularly after annexation became final on June 30, 1999, and after water and sewer were extended to the area. The annexation brought special problems for the Kannapolis Police Department, however,
as the annexed area included busy Highway 73, as well as Northwest Middle and Northwest High Schools. After months of planning by the Kannapolis Vision Cabinet, which was charged with envisioning the future of the city in the new millennium and with setting goals to help the city reach its future, the Cabinet released its report in September 1999, entitled A Kannapolis Investment Portfolio. The report set forth goals for the new century, including the development of more greenways, revitalization in older neighborhoods, the development of a business park, and the building of a city hall which would allow all city operations to be held under one roof. The new plan was showcased to local residents at a barbecue held at A.L. Brown High School in October 1999. The historic year also saw an end to the lengthy and rancorous dispute over the unionization of the local mills. The new mill owner, Pillitex Corporation, already had several plants which were unionized. Pillitex agreed to recognize the Union of Needle Trades, Industrial, and Textile Employees, or UNITE, as a bargaining agent in the Kannapolis plants. In November 2000, the news that new owner Pillitex Corporation had filed for bankruptcy protection sent shockwaves through the Kannapolis community. Although Pillitex managed to emerge from bankruptcy protection in 2000, historic Cannon Plant No. 4 was a casualty of the reorganization. It permanently closed its doors in 2001, and attention turned to finding tenants for the giant building and jobs for the workers who were displaced as a result of the closing. Although Pillitex had survived bankruptcy reorganization, it continued to struggle against a flood of foreign imports, its own overextended credit, and serious cash flow problems. On Wednesday, July 30, 2003, Pillitex announced that it would permanently close its plants and lay off all its workers. The layoff, which was the largest in North Carolina history, affected some 4,300 workers in Kannapolis, Concord, China Grove, and Rockwell. Many of the people in the plant and in the local community were shocked. They had discussed many times what would happen if the plants ever closed, but never really expected that day to come. It was hard to imagine that after a century of providing quality textiles to every corner of the world, the great mills would no longer be in operation. Many of the workers were second and third generation Cannon workers. They had no training in any other job, nor did they expect to work at any other job during their lifetime. They had close ties to the community. They took great pride in their work. Many of them attended local churches and traded at local businesses. Many of their parents were buried in local Kannapolis cemeteries. For all of us, it was a time of loss, a sense of wonder that life as we had always known it had turned completely upside down in one afternoon. There were also important economic consequences to the closings. Workers had purchased homes and consumer goods based on their continued employment at the mills. Health insurance was tied to Pillitex. Even retirement for many workers was in question. Although the workers were highly skilled at their textile jobs, they would need extensive retraining in order to rejoin the workforce of a new century. Many of them who had questioned for years, what would we do if the mill ever closed, found themselves finding that the unimaginable had become all too real. The giant plant closing sent shockwaves through a state which was already dealing with the loss of furniture, tobacco, and other textile jobs. As it had so often in the past, however, the disaster brought out the best in the Kannapolis community. Local leaders began to inventory benefits which were available to laid-off workers. and to assist them in efforts to obtain federal funds to assist with their retraining for other jobs. Local churches and charities began to take stock of their resources and to plan how to deal with what was expected to be an unprecedented demand on their goods and services. Unions began to help workers organize and to apply for various hospitalization and other benefits to which they might be entitled. In December 2004, financier David Murdoch, who still had substantial real estate holdings in the Kannapolis area, purchased at auction the 250-acre site of Plant 1 of the former Cannon chain. He immediately began to form plans and develop a vision for the best business use for the property.
I'm very proud to announce today North Carolina Research Campus. That's what we're going to create here, a campus. The new campus is a collaboration between my company, Doe, and Tassel & Cook, and the North Carolina University system.
Like his predecessor, J.W. Cannon, Mr. Murdoch saw in the area and in his hard-working residents the foundations for a new community of research facilities and schools, complete with high-quality recreational areas, living quarters, and with technical job opportunities for a new century. On September 12, 2005, David Murdoch announced plans for a $1 billion scientific and economic revitalization project called the North Carolina Research Campus. Just a short time later, in February 2006, ground was broken for the centerpiece of that project, the core laboratory building. It seems appropriate that ground was broken on the site of the former town lake, the very spot where the first surveyor's stakes were driven in 1906, when James W. Cannon, another man of vision, prepared to turn his dream into a reality. Newly elected Mayor Bob Meisenheimer, City Manager Mike Legg, and their staffs are working hard to make the research campus an important part of their plans for the future of Kannapolis. Much that was here has been lost, but long before the ongoing demolition of the mill buildings even began, the great neon sign that announced to all those passing here that they were in the heart of textile country had been removed. The great buildings downtown had been leveled. Many pioneer Kannapolis businesses, such as Taylor's Hatchery, had closed their doors. Legendary Kannapolis race car driver Dale Earnhardt was lost in an accident. Woodrow Wilson School was demolished. McKeever School and J.W. Cannon Junior High School were lost to fire. Little Mount Vernon had been removed. My grandparents' boarding house and many other early buildings had been removed and parking lots had been built. Much remained in this community, however. We still had our hopes and dreams, our belief and optimism in the future, our work ethic, our courage and our concern for one another, our compassion as people. Primarily, though, we had our dreams and the dreams of our children for a new and for a brighter future.
We're not even particularly anxious to shed the old mill hand label, for those blue-collar workers were proud that their products were shipped all over the world and represented the highest quality textile products produced at that time. We still have our ties to the community, enormous pride in our sports teams, our bands, our institutions, and our history. All of those things form a foundation for a new Kannapolis Renaissance as we come together to guide the city into a new century and into a new and even brighter future. When Kannapolis celebrated her 75th birthday in 1981, then President Ronald Reagan wrote to congratulate the town. What he said then is appropriate today.
Kannapolis is a shining example of enterprise and optimism, a place where men and women working together have produced a thriving textile industry and, more importantly, a home to those who love it dearly. The spirit which has built your community is a reflection of the energy which has forged America into a land of wonder. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate the renewal of an old dream in a much beloved corner of this land of wonder. We hope to see you again real soon.